created this phenomenal fact, only to have a bunch of question marks floating over my head. It's true, I wrote a book about my life as a young girl when I hung out in raging Hollywood, freaking out on stage with local bands, creaming my lace undies over the brand new long-haired boys littering the streets. I also chronicled my relationships with a bunch of different guys, most of whom were musicians, but I never expected to be introduced on the Today Show as Queen of the Groupies. Wow, what a twisted and unique legacy. I never know whether to defend myself or take a bow. Should I have my own TV show or move to some remote island and gnaw on mangoes all day long? Did I live it up just to have to live it down? I've had a lot of shit, you can imagine. You really probably can't imagine the shit I got. Okay, when I met the Birds on the Sunset Strip and knocked on that backstage door, there was no word for what I was doing. But what was wrong with it? Who was I hurting? I had to find my place in and around the music I loved so much. Nothing, not even the panicky fear of foolish failure, was going to stop me. In the 90s, when this was written, there was a little more room in the industry for rock-crazed women, although there are still nowhere near enough A&R females, if you ask me. But back then there was no room, and I needed to be near the inspiration. And guess what? I was a welcome visitor. And as I wandered around backstage throughout those mad years, all I really wanted to do was locate Mr. Right, Mr. Forever, someone I could devote myself to, and he had to play the devil's music. Yeah. Actually, I'm really proud of my thrilling heritage. I've always considered myself to be a freewheeling feminist, a lover of men, and a champion of chicks. In Like a Rolling Stone, Bob Dylan prodded and provoked. You shouldn't let other people get your kicks for you. Isn't that the greatest advice ever? And my lifestyle was validated. Thanks, Bob. I've always been determined to get my own glorious, heart-aching kicks. Despite the hardcore fact that we all make big fat mistakes, all of us have moments in life when time stands still for a few illuminating, mesmerizing split seconds, and we are all brilliantly grateful to be in our bodies, on our planet, alive right now. The reason for being comes into focus. Everything shimmers with clarity, and the hills are alive with the sound of music. Know what I mean? When I was Jimmy Page's dollface of the moment, I got real chummy with the rest of the band. And one night before Led Zeppelin swept majestically onto the stage, one by one they slipped their big hunky turquoise bracelets on my arm for safekeeping. I stood by the side of the stage, touching the trendy, treasured Indian silver, watching my friends make rock and roll history, feeling honored and blessed. Got a whole lot of love. I knew I'd have my hands all over the exquisite, coveted Jimmy after the show, and I was awash with luminous gratitude. Of course, I was only 20 years old at the time. After Jimmy's day off, which we spent holed up in my tiny pink bedroom under Grandma's handmade quilt listening to Led Zeppelin 2 until I had it totally memorized, Peter Grant, their infamous mountainous manager, called to tell us we were all going to Vegas that night to see Elvis. It was way overwhelming. I sat in between Robert Plant and Jimmy Page in the front row while the leather-clad king scorched the room with his gigantic voice, flaunting his royalty in grand, steaming style. That was so great. Of course, Red West came up to us came to our table and said, "Would you like to meet Elvis?" to Jimmy. And he said, "Oh, no, thank you." What? That actually happened. Later they met him, and I was not there, which is really a shame. There was also the lovely night I walked right on stage with the Doors. The day before the show, I had discovered Jim Morrison digging around in his fridge, wearing leather pants so low you could see his crack, living right down the hill from one of my best friends in Laurel Canyon. I'd been hanging out in the danger zone, inhaling a lethal substance called Trimar, which I have since found out was an intense liquid version of PCP. In fact, my freak flag is constantly at half-mast, mourning the brain cells that bit the dust in those lazy, hazy heydays. But way back in the summer of Love Sunshine, I did the neighborly thing and went down to introduce myself to the Lizard King. Being in the most cockeyed condition imaginable, I promptly did a full backbend in the middle of his living room and found myself gazing up at his red-headed girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, common-law wife, right, who asked me impolitely to leave. As I offered her a hanky of Trimar, which she declined with menace, Jim hissed from behind me, "Get it on." And moments after I headed back up the 100 Rock stairs, he was tapping on the door, wanting to try a spot of the ill-advised liquid. And moments after where am I now? Okay. Okay. Hours passed as we lolled and rolled around under the chemical spell, laughing our pixelated asses off. I don't remember when he went back home, but I slept almost comatose until the Doors sound check at the Hullabaloo Club the following afternoon. As I stumbled down the stairs on my way to the club, I almost tripped on the many broken Doors demos, which I figured the redhead had hurled down as Jim climbed up. Or was it the other way around? I really don't know. Either way, she must have been entirely unamused. Poor Pam Morrison. Can you imagine the shit she had to put up with through the years? We can't even imagine that. Let me see if I should go into... Yeah, I'll read a little more of this, and then I can do a Q&A. Think about what you want to ask me. Okay? Like the time I was sitting around in a pent-up hotel room with the Rolling Stones after that poor soul had been knifed to death in front of the band at Altamont. I was concentrating on my composure instead of attempting to console Mick Jagger. He had invited me back to the hotel after the show, which had been full of historically bad vibes from assorted Hells Angels and too many too high people. I hadn't heard about the killing until I had Mick on the phone and he told me to come right over. I sat in that dismal, quaking room with the entire band, plus Graham Parsons and Michelle Phillips, while the Stones tried to figure out how the hideous thing could have happened. I was only 20 years old, but wished so hard that I could slip a drop of insight into the conversation. I sat mute, counting the seconds as they slowly slid by. Each one of them hurt. I ached to offer condolence and actually did put together a humble sentence of sympathy, but it just wasn't enough. Mick said he was thinking of quitting rock and roll. I didn't protest, even though my thighs cramped at the thought. I looked over at Michelle Phillips curled into a big chair. The corroded old line, "A woman's place is in the home," popped to mind. My mom's place was in the home. I could picture her in her seersucker pedal pushers, pulling weeds in our chain-link encased backyard. So what was I doing with the world's raunchiest rock and roll band as they discussed murder and mayhem? I found myself in so many crazy places. I was the Forrest Gump of rock and roll. I was just everywhere. It just happened that way. How about the time my new photographer friend called to ask if I would like to be in a small film he was directing for this new trio from England, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. I danced in one of the very first rock videos, Foxy Lady, wriggling around in skimpy blue velvet to the nihilistic sound oozing from this wild man's guitar. From my vantage point behind the stage, I watched the eyeball on his hand-painted jacket contort and wink. But when he wanted my phone number, I just couldn't bring myself to give it to him. I regret that now. I have no regrets at all except for things I did not do, and Jimi Hendrix is one of them. Okay. Pam, dear, there's someone on the phone for you. It's Jimi Hendrix. Oh, thanks, Mom. I tried to melt into the psychedelic walls when I wasn't perched on top of the plaster Greek column, going hard and fast. Here I come, baby. I'm coming to get ya. How did I get there? Me, Pam Miller from Reseda, California. I'd obviously wanted to be in these exalted places. In fact, I worked extra hard at being in the grooviest place at the grooviest time, only to go cross-eyed with angst when the dream came true. But I have to give myself credit, because even though I palpitated from head to toe during these excruciatingly magnificent moments, at least I got myself there. Determination overpowered my heebie-jeebies every time. Praise the Lord. So.